The Death Knights, 5 years after the Dark Portal. Gul'dan contemplated many ways to deliver on his promise of making new warriors. It was paramount that they secretly pledged their loyalty to him, and so the Warlock turned to his Shadow Council. Though its members were dead, their spirits remained intact. If Gul'dan could bring them back from the grip of death, he believed they would be forever grateful to him. Gul'dan and Shogal gathered the Shadow Council's disembodied spirits and searched for a way to place them in physical shells. The Warlock considered using the bodies of orcs, or even ogres, who had fallen in the First War. Yet, he knew that the Horde would never stand for such desecration of his honored dead. It would cause an uproar among the clans and lead to swift retribution against Gul'dan. No, the orcs and ogres were out of the question, but humans were not. Gul'dan would meld the Shadow Council spirits with the corpses of Stormwind's greatest knights. Because fell magic had been outlawed, Gul'dan would transfer these soldiers into powerful necromancers. He and Shogal conducted bloody ritual after bloody ritual to complete their work. After a series of bitter failures, they finally succeeded. Gul'dan fused the spirits of his old ally, Taron Gore, to the corpse of a fallen Stormwind knight. Necromantic energy surged through the rotting body and raised it into undeath. This shambling skeletal horror became known as Taron Gore Fiend. He was the first of what Gul'dan would call the Death Knights. These soldiers of darkness were the ultimate successors to warlocks. They had no need of food or rest. The Death Knights could summon necromantic energies to rip the life of their enemies and even raise the dead as reinforcements on the battlefield. Having perfected his techniques, Gul'dan forged more Death Knights. The sight of them sickened Orgrim. They were unnatural abominations, and they had been created from the fallen members of the Shadow Council, the very organization that Orgrim saw as responsible for killing the Orcs' homeworld. Yet, despite all of the War Chief's misgivings, he could not deny the Death Knight's potential. They used a different breed of magic than fell sorcery, one that was immensely powerful but would not drain the land of life. After weighing his options, Doomhammer accepted these unholy warriors into the Horde. The longer he waited, the more he risked losing the element of surprise in attacking the human nations. The Death Knights were the weapon he needed to crush Lordaeron, a means to strike fear into his enemies and counter humanity's magic. Orgrim ordered members of the Blackrock clan to keep a close watch on the Death Knights. Secretly, the Warchief planned to destroy Gul'dan and his undead soldiers once the Horde had secured victory. Orgrim was right to mistrust the Death Knights. Though they openly swore their allegiance to the Horde, they cared little for the Warchief or his armies. The Death Knights were also not the subservient followers that Gul'dan had hoped they would be. They were loyal only to themselves, and they acted solely to preserve their own existence. After the creation of Death Knights, all that remained was to replenish the Horde's dwindling supplies and armaments. For that, Orgrim turned his gaze to Khaz-Modan, homeland of the Bronzebeard dwarves. Invasion of Khaz-Modan. The Bronzebeard dwarves were a proud and resilient people. For over 2,000 years, they had dwelled in Ironforge, a grand city carved into the heart of a mountain. The surrounding region, Khaz-Modan, was filled with dwarven blacksmithing forges, and the mountain were rich with oil and metal ores. Before moving against Lordaeron, the orcs would conquer the dwarves' homeland and use its resources to bolster their arsenals. Amid the fierce blizzard, the Horde marched into Khaz-Modan. The dwarves were ready. Demolition teams collapsed the mountain tunnels leading into the region, slowing the orcs' approach. Meanwhile, the dwarves called upon their old allies, the gnomes, for aid. The two races pooled their resources and set up defensive positions across Khaz-Modan. Despite these preparations, the dwarves and the gnomes were no match for the orcish army. The horde swept into Cosmodan with the fury of a winter storm. Hundreds of dwarves and gnomes fell before the orcs' hungry blades. One by one, the horde conquered the small settlements, outposts, and armories that dotted the icy landscape. Cosmodan's defenders withered before the horde's onslaught. The gnomes retreated to their capital, Gnomuragan, while the dwarves fled back to their fortress city, Ironforge. Seeing the dwarves as the greater of the two threats, Doomhammer committed his forces to toppling Ironforge. Yet, it would not fall as the rest of Cosmodan had. Nearly all of the city's residents took up arms. They knew this might be the last stand, and they were prepared to die with battle axe in hand before surrendering. The horde smashed against Ironforge like a battering ram, but to no avail. Every dwarf who died in battle brought 10 orcs with them to the grave. The cost in lives grew so great that Doomhammer called off the siege. Ironforge was not his main goal, and he saw no need to throw his soldier's life away to conquer the stronghold. Doomhammer had what he needed. Cosmodan and its bountiful resources were his to exploit. To keep the dwarves contained, Doomhammer stationed the Bleeding Hollow clan outside Ironforge's gates. He then ordered his Blackrock orcs to mine the surrounding mountains and commandeer the dwarves' forges. Before long, thick smoke blanked Cosmodan. Blacksmiths distributed newly wrought ornaments and siege weapons throughout the horde. The time to invade Lordaeron was drawing near. Tides of Darkness. After conquering the bulk of Cosmodan, Doomhammer plotted the next phase of his campaign. To reach the human kingdom by land, the orcs would need to pass through the swampy mire to the north called the Wetlands. It was a perilous route. Transporting siege engines and an army through that terrain would be a long, grueling slog. Then, the orcs would be forced to cross the narrow Thandal-span bridge that led into the northern lands, a sight the humans could easily defend. The humans would likely expect the horde to cross north by land, but Doomhammer would not do the expected. He would build a fleet of ships and launch a surprise attack into the heart of humanity's territories. Though few orcs publicly questioned Doomhammer's decisions, many had reservations about his plans. The orcs were not a seafaring people. Most of the superstitious clans feared the open sea. Much to Orgrim's surprise, Gul'dan and his Stormreaver clan proved to be instrumental in persuading the horde to cross by sea. The Warlock and his follower urged their allies that it was the best course of action and that the voyage would be safe. Orgrim welcomed the assistance, but he remained wary of Gul'dan's motivations. In a bay tucked in the southwestern wetlands, Orgrim oversaw the construction of a vast, yet crude fleet. Orcs knew little of shipbuilding, but they had allies who did. Some of the horde's ogres had maritime knowledge, and they helped construct immense vessels called juggernauts. The Amani trolls also instructed the orcs in the ways of building small but swift ships that could safely navigate the sea and rivers. In addition, Doomhammer required aid from a completely new ally, the goblins. These ingenious and cunning creatures had witnessed the horde's arrival and its conquest of Stormwind. More war was on the horizon, and they were determined to profit from it. Rather than avoid the orcs, the goblins of the Steamweedle cartel approached the invaders with an offer. The horde was new to Azeroth, and it had much to learn about the world and its cultures. The goblins could provide new technologies, maps, and other useful information to the orcs, for the right price. The warchief would not force the bold goblins into servitude. That was something Blackhand might have done. Orgrim saw more benefit in treating them as equals. If it was gold they wanted, gold they could have. The orcs had recovered a fortune of Stormwind's coffers, but they had no need of coin. Doomhammer paid the goblins handsomely for their aid. When he learned that they were also accomplished shipwrights, he hired them to oversee the construction of the horde's fleet. With the help of the goblins and the horde's other members, orc builders set to work. Doomhammer did everything he could to camouflage the construction from human scouts. Alliance of Lordaeron. Far north of the wetlands, the Council of Seven Nations continued debating the merits of unity. During these meetings, gnome and dwarf refugees arrived with dire news. The orcs had conquered Casmodon. This turn of events shocked the human leaders. The dwarves and the gnomes were mighty, and the speed with which their territories had fallen defied understanding. What was worse, the Horde was now encroaching north. Even with this troubling development, King Greymane of Gilneas and King Perinold of Alterac stubbornly resisted calls for creating the alliance. They feared that by unifying, they would lose some of their regional power. Divisions widened between the gathered leaders. Their arguments grew so fierce that Gilneas and Alterac threatened to abandon the council. One person in attendance could not stand by as the humans squabbled over meaningless issues. His name was Turaleon, and he was one of Lordaeron's most venerated priests. Turaleon brought Stormwind's prince, Varian, to his side. The priest called on the leaders to forget their old differences. If they underestimated the orcs, every kingdom would suffer Stormwind's fate. Their cities would burn, and their children would become orphans much like Varian, if their children survived at all. The orcs were not a merciful people. Turaleon argued that the kingdom stood at a crossroads. If they failed to unite, history would know humanity as a people who were too proud to band together. A people who'd had a chance to save Azeroth, but instead had thrown it all away over politics and illusions of power. Yet, if humans did unite into the Alliance, they could change history. They could arise as Azeroth's guardians. After all, no other race in the known world had humanity's resources, its strength of leadership, or its bravery. The Council of the Seven Nations erupted in applause after Turaleon's speech. His words even swayed Greymane and Perinold. That very day, the human leaders voted unanimously to form the Alliance of Lordaeron. Debates followed about who could best lead the Alliance military, and the rulers decided on Anduin Lothar. Because he was from Stormwind, he had no political ties to the northern human nations. He could command the armies fairly and act as a neutral party in disputes. Lothar accepted this title with great humility. As supreme commander of the Alliance army, he wielded more power and influence than any human had since the days of the ancient King Thoradin. Lothar immediately rallied the Alliance's forces and ordered them to gather in Hillsbrad foothills, a region north of the wetlands. Order of the Silver Hand. As the human forces amassed, Lothar made other preparations. The alliance was composed of disparate nations, some of which were rivals. They all had different customs and ways of life. Lothar needed something to bind them as one. He needed champions whom every human could rally behind, no matter where they came from. The clerics were the most obvious choice to fill this role, but they hadn't fared well in the First War. Though they were brave, they lacked martial training. Clerics were better suited to using the holy light to mend wounds of the battlefield. Lothar needed something else. The solution came from the Church of the Holy Light. Archbishop Alonius Foul had recently learned of everything that had transpired in Stormwind, including how the clerics had fared. He met with Lothar and proposed forging a new order, one that would represent the best qualities of humanity. It would comprise soldiers who were skilled not only in wielding the light, but also in leadership and in the arts of traditional warfare. With Lothar's permission, Foul recruited a handful of knights to form this new order. These individuals all showed an aptitude for the holy light, and they also exemplified the qualities of loyalty, bravery, and honor. Foul called his students the Paladins, and their group was named the Order of the Silver Hand. The Order's members were revered individuals from Lordaeron. There was Turaleon, the priest who had helped forge the alliance at the Council of the Seven Nations. There was Sidon Dathruhan, a mountain of a man who was gifted with immense physical strength. Then there was Tyrion Fordring, a knight renowned for his zeal and resilience. Lastly, there was Uther. He had already apprenticed under Fowl for many years, and he was an accomplished knight and a pious believer in the Holy Light. Lothar also sent one of his comrades from Stormwind to undergo paladin training, Gavinrad the Dire, a battle-hardened knight who had fought in the First War. Fowl welcomed this student with open arms. The city of Stratholm would later serve as the paladin's base of operations. Yet, for the time being, Lothar kept them close, ordering them to travel alongside the main Alliance army. Day and night, the holy warriors were trained vigorously. Fowl taught them how to use the light to comfort their allies and smite their enemies, and also how to lead by example. There would be more than just weapons. No matter how dire times became, the paladins would serve as light in the darkness, as beacons of hope to guide the Alliance. Fowl instructed his paladins to live simple lives. They would seek no fortune or glory in war. Until the end of their days, they would put the needs of others above their own. As training progressed, Fowl presented a set of enchanted librams to the paladins. These holy tombs were some of the church's most ancient relics. Each libram represented what Fowl saw as a core trait of the Silver Hand: retribution, holiness, protection, justice, and compassion. Fowl gave one libram to each of the paladins. He challenged his students to become living embodiments of what their holy tomes represented. Turalyon would hold the libram of protection. Uther would hold the libram of justice. Tyrion would hold the libram of retribution. Sidon would hold the libram of holiness. Gavinrad would hold the libram of compassion. Lothar often checked in on the emergent order of the Silver Hand. He was so pleased by what he saw that he asked Turalyon and Uther to serve as his lieutenants. Fowl was happy to accommodate the Supreme Commander, but he did not release the paladins from his care yet. It would be weeks before they were ready to set foot on the battlefield. The Binding of Alexstrasza. South of Lordaeron, Alexstrasza, the Lifebinder, and her Red Dragons continued searching for who had stolen the Demon Soul. Their investigations eventually led them to the orcs. Alexstrasza and her king arrived just in time to witness the Horde's brutal assault on Casmodan. Though the Lifebinder longed to aid the dwarves and the gnomes, finding the Demon Soul was paramount. The artifact contained the powers of every dragon aspect except for Deathwing. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could spell the doom of not only Dragonkin, but the whole world. Alexstrasza soon discovered that the Demon Soul was in the care of an orc known as Necros. He and his Dragonmaw clan were experimenting with the artifact and abusing its power. Alexstrasza and her followers descended on Necros, expecting little resistance. Such a primitive creature could never unlock the Demon Soul's secrets. The dragons were wrong. Unbeknownst to Alexstrasza and her allies, Necros had learned much about the artifact from dreams and visions sent by Deathwing. The Black Dragon aspect had taught the orc of the Demon Soul's true power, and he had instructed him in how to wield it. The greatest knowledge Deathwing had shared with Necros was that the relic could be used to enslave Alexstrasza and the other dragon aspects. Necros called on the Demon Soul's fury, and the artifact seared the Lifebinder with excruciating pain. Alexstrasza plummed from the sky and slammed into the mountains outside Casmodan. Necros then bent the Demon Soul's power to enslave the Lifebinder, and the rest of the Dragonmaw orcs swarmed over the enormous creature and bound her in chains. Though the Demon Soul could also be wielded against other dragons, Necros was but one orc, and his knowledge of the artifact was limited. He knew he would never be able to use the relic's power on Alexstrasza and her followers at once, and so he focused his attentions on the Lifebinder. The Red Dragons could do little to help their queen. Every time one of them swooped down toward the orcs, Necros lashed Alexstrasza with the Demon Soul's extraordinary power. He did not speak the language of dragons, But his message was clear. When the dragons attacked the orcs, RX'd suffered great pain. By enslaving RX'd, Necros effectively bound the red dragons to his will. The creatures feared that if they did not obey the Dragon Maw, RX'd would be tortured or even killed. Grim Batol. Word of the Dragon Maw's feat spread throughout the Horde. No one was more pleased by the news than War Chief Doomhammer. He now had another potent weapon in his arsenal. Yet, he would take time to reliably control the dragons and use them in the heat of battle. Doomhammer commanded Necros and the Dragon Maw to take control of Grim Batol, a remote fortress in the mountains east of the wetlands. This dilapidated stronghold had once belonged to the Wildhammer dwarves, but the clan had abandoned it long ago. Necros and his followers chained RX'd in Grim Batol's depths. They also forced the other red dragons who had been with the Aspect to accompany them, threatening to hurt the Lifebinder if they disobeyed. On Draenor, the Dragon Maw had mastered the art of training winged Rylax as battle mounts. They would do the same with their fearsome captives in Grim Batol. While the orcs set to work crafting harnesses and saddles, Necros kept watch over RX'd. The Lifebinder vowed to destroy the orc for what it was doing, but her threats were hollow. As long as Necros had the demon soul, he was untouchable. During her imprisonment, RX'd began laying new clutches of eggs. Necros was quick to see this development as a golden opportunity. If his clan could successfully hatch the eggs, the orcs could raise the dragon whelps as the Horde's loyal servants. From afar, Deathwing rejoiced in RX'd's enslavement. He continued subtly advising Necros in how best to use the demon soul to control the red dragons. Giving the Horde such powerful weapons served Deathwing's plans to restore his black dragonflight. But there was an added benefit. He knew it would break the Lifebinder's heart to see her kin used as tools of war, and he would relish every moment of RX'd's torment. The Arathi bloodline. As the Horde was bolstering its forces, so too was the Alliance. Lothar had the full might of the human nations at his command, but he would take no chances against the Horde. He sought help wherever he could, including from the ancient and powerful High Elves of Quel'Thalas. Long ago, humans and elves had fought a bloody war against the Amani trolls. Only by uniting had Quel'Thalas and Lothar's ancestors triumphed over their enemies. Following the victory, the High Elves swore an oath to the human king Thoradin. If he or any of his bloodline ever required aid in the future, Quel'Thalas would give it without question. Lothar carried Thoradin's blood, and he beseeched the High Elves to make good on their ancient pact. Lothar's calls to war was met with mixed feelings in Quel'Thalas. The High Elf King, an Asterian Sunstrider, had heard rumors about strange creatures in the south, but he did not consider them a threat. He sent only a small elven fleet to the Alliance, commanding the rest of his forces to stay in Quel'Thalas. Not everyone did. The highly skilled ranger captain Alaria Windrunner disobeyed her king's orders and brought a handful of her fellow elves south. She believed the Horde was a much greater danger than most of her kin did, and she was determined to see what the orcs could do with their own eyes. Though Lothar was disappointed with the small number of elves who joined the alliance, he didn't show it publicly. He welcomed them with open arms. The Rangers in particular would serve a much-needed role as archers, scouts, and mobile support troops. The elves arrived in Hillsbrad foothills by sea just as dire news reached Lothar. Like most members of the Alliance, he had expected the Horde to invade the north by crossing the Thandal Span, an effort that would have taken many more months. Yet, human scouts reported that the orcs had constructed a fleet, and they were poised to set sail. The invasion would happen much sooner than Lothar had anticipated. Lothar urged the rest of the Alliance's armies to gather in Hillsbrad foothills, the most likely place the Horde would make landfall. To waylay the Orcish fleet for the time being, the Supreme Commander called upon Admiral Dalen Proudmoore and the Alliance Navy. Seas of Fire. Warchief Doomhammer had not expected to keep his fleet a secret forever. When he learned that human scouting ships had spied his vessels, he made no change to his plans. Construction of the Horde fleet had finished, and he commanded his troops to board. Orgrim believed the Horde would reach southern Lordaeron before the humans could muster a proper defense. The advantage would be small, but Orgrim had learned from a lifetime of warfare that small advantages often meant the difference between victory and defeat. Hundreds of Orcish ships, laden with supplies and thousands of soldiers, sliced through the rolling sea. Their journey was not uncontested. Near the island of Zuldare, Admiral Dalen Proudmoore and the Alliance Navy intercepted the Horde fleet. When Proudmoore found the crewed Horde ships, it was akin to a wolf crossing paths with an injured lamb. The Admiral hailed from the island nation of Kul Tiras, and he'd spent his entire life on the high seas. His experience in maritime warfare had no equal in the world. Proudmoore's sleek vessels outmaneuvered the Horde's fleet even quicker than he'd anticipated. The first Alliance cannon volley blew Orcish ships to pieces, dozens of transports sank, and the churning waves swallowed their crews. Proudmoore soon realized that he would destroy the entire Horde army at sea. He could end the war against the Alliance before it had even started. Perhaps he would have, if not for the arrival of dragons. Doomhammer had known that the humans were better equipped for battle at sea. That was why he'd ordered Necros and the Dragonmaw clan to supply aerial support in the form of red dragons. At first, Necros had protested. His orcs had not yet trained the dragons to be suitable battle mounts. Yet, after Doomhammer pressured him, Necros relented. He dispatched 3 red dragons to guard the Horde fleet, threatened to torture Alexstrasza if they disobeyed. Reluctantly, the dragons had followed the Orcish ships from a distance. When Proudmoore's navy attacked, they finally revealed themselves. The enormous creatures dove from the sky and bathed the Alliance fleet in fire. Proudmoore had no means to fend off the dragons, though small in number they were. The Admiral called for a full retreat, and his ships scattered.